Nathan Walker signed his name to a $44 million wire transfer 3 days before his wife filed for divorce, and she never once looked at the paperwork on his desk. She was too busy packing. Maya had already made up her mind. Her ex-boyfriend, Devin Price, had just landed the investment deal of his life, and every headline in her feed said the same thing. Rising star, self-made, unstoppable. Her mother had been sending her the articles for a week straight, each one attached with the same quiet accusation. Look what he became. Look what you settled for. Nathan hadn't flaunted anything in 12 years of marriage. He drove a 6-year-old Camry. He wore the same 3 suits on rotation. He ate leftovers standing at the kitchen counter because sitting down felt like a luxury he hadn't earned yet, even though, technically, he'd earned more before breakfast most mornings than most people made in a year. Nobody knew that. That was the point. Maya didn't know it either. 12 years, and she still thought her husband worked something in finance, some vague mid-level job he never discussed because, in her words, it was boring. She stopped asking a long time ago. She stopped noticing the calls he took behind closed doors, the late nights reviewing pitch decks nobody sent him but the ones he'd requested himself, quietly through a foundation with no name attached to his. She noticed Devin, though. Devin posted everything. The night she saw the announcement, she sat on the edge of the bed with her phone lighting up her face and felt something curdle in her chest that she mistook for regret. Not for what she'd built with Nathan. Regret for what she hadn't chosen. He's worth millions now, she said, not really to Nathan, more to the room. Nathan was folding laundry. He didn't look up. Good for him. That's it? Good for him? What do you want me to say? She wanted him to react. She wanted him to feel small, the way she suddenly felt large with possibility. Like she'd been handed a second door out of a house that had grown too quiet. Nathan just kept folding shirts, and something about his stillness made her angrier than any argument could have. Her family didn't help. Her sister called it fate. Her mother called it a wake-up call. You're 34, Maya. You have time to fix this, but not forever. Nobody in that family had ever asked Nathan a single question about his work. Nobody had ever wondered why a man who claimed to do something in finance never once complained about money, never panicked during the years the market cratered, never flinched at private school tuition or the mortgage or anything at all. 3 weeks later, Maya served him divorce papers on a Tuesday morning in the kitchen while the coffee was still brewing. Nathan read them standing up. He didn't argue. He didn't ask her to reconsider. He set the papers on the counter, finished making his coffee, and said 4 words that she'd replay in her head for months afterward without understanding. Not yet, not for a long time. You should sign carefully. She thought he meant the papers. He didn't. Within a month, she was seen with Devin at a rooftop restaurant downtown, photographed for a local business blog under the caption, Rising Star and New Flame. Her mother sent that one too, this time with 3 heart emojis. Maya told herself this was what growth looked like. New beginnings. Upgrading a life that had gone stagnant. What she didn't know, what nobody outside a locked file cabinet and a handful of legal signatures knew, was that 18 months earlier, a private investment foundation with no public face had reviewed Devin Price's failing startup and seen something worth saving. The foundation didn't publish its benefactors' names. It never had. That was the one condition attached to every dollar it moved. Confidentiality until close. Nathan had built that foundation from nothing, over 9 years, out of money most people assumed he didn't have because he never once acted like he had it. He'd watched Devin's pitch decks fail twice before this one. He'd watched the 3rd version, retooled, sharper, actually viable. He didn't fund it because of who Devin was to Maya. He funded it because the numbers worked, and because that was what he did quietly for strangers for years, expecting nothing back but growth. He hadn't expected his wife to leave him for the man he was building. The acquisition ceremony was scheduled for the following spring. Press, investors, a stage. Devin's name on every banner in the room. Maya would be there too, on his arm, in a black dress with a $44 million company folder tucked under someone else's arm, believing she'd finally landed on the winning side. She had no idea the signature on every page of that deal was about to walk through the door behind her. The morning of the ceremony, Maya stood in front of her mirror for almost an hour, adjusting a necklace Devin had bought her the week before, a thin gold chain that cost more than her first car. She told herself this was a reward for finally choosing herself. She told herself a lot of things that spring. Nathan told her nothing. He hadn't spoken to her in 6 weeks. Not since the papers were finalized. Not since she'd walked out of the house they built together carrying 2 suitcases and a version of the story where he was a man who let her down. He wasn't invited to the ceremony. Nobody had reason to invite him. To the room full of investors and cameras and champagne. Nathan Walker was a name on a legal document, not a face anyone would recognize. That was exactly how he designed it. The venue was a glass-walled event hall downtown, the kind of space rented specifically to be photographed. Rows of chairs face a raised platform and a banner behind it read Price Ventures. The future of logistics. Devin's face printed 8 feet tall beside it, jaw set, arms crossed, dressed like a man who'd always known this day was coming. Maya sat in the second row, close enough to the stage that photographers kept turning their lenses toward her too. She liked that. She'd spent months rebuilding an identity around being seen, after years of being married to a man who preferred not to be. Devin found her eyes once before the ceremony started and gave her a small, private smile, the kind meant only for her. She smiled back and thought, this is what I was supposed to have. The lead attorney for the deal, a sharp woman named Renata Cole, stepped up to the podium first. She thanked the investors, thanked the legal teams, thanked the board. Routine, expected, the kind of speech nobody actually listens to. Then she said something that wasn't routine at all. Before we begin the formal signing, Renata said, the board asked that we take a moment to recognize the individual whose investment made this entire acquisition possible. Mr. Price has asked, and we've agreed that this recognition happened publicly today for the first time. A murmur moved through the room. Devin's smile faltered for half a second before he caught it and smoothed it back into place. He hadn't requested this. He'd been told the benefactor wanted a name attached now that the deal was closing, a condition of the final signature. He'd agree without asking too many questions, the way people do when $44 million is on the other side of the door. Maya leaned forward slightly. She assumed it would be some faceless bank executive, some fund manager in a suit she'd never see again. She reached for her phone to take a photo for later, the kind of photo that said, I was there when it happened. Renata turned toward the side entrance. For the past 18 months, this company has been rebuilt from near collapse under a confidentiality agreement requested by the primary benefactor, she said. That agreement ends today. Ladies and gentlemen, the founding investor behind Price Ventures' $44 million recapitalization. The doors opened. Nathan walked in wearing the same charcoal suit he'd worn to their wedding 12 years earlier, the one Maya used to tease him about because he refused to buy a new one for anything, not even their anniversary dinners. He hadn't changed his walk. He hadn't changed his face. He looked smaller than the banner behind him, and that was exactly why nobody had ever suspected him. Maya's phone stayed frozen in her hand, screen dark, forgotten. For a full 3 seconds, nobody in the audience reacted because nobody recognized him. Then a low ripple of recognition moved through the second row, started with Maya's own mother, who had met Nathan a dozen times at family dinners and had spent those dinners looking past him toward the door. Devin's face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. He knew the investor's legal name from the paperwork, Nathan Walker. He'd seen it on every document for 18 months and had never once connected it to the quiet man who used to sit across from him at holiday tables years ago, back when he and Maya were still together, back before any of this began. The name had felt abstract then, a signature on a contract, nothing more. Now it had a face standing 8 feet from him under his own banner. "Mr. Walker," Renata said, gesturing him toward the podium. "Would you like to say a few words?" Nathan stepped up. He didn't look at Devin. He didn't look at Maya, not yet. He looked out of the room of investors who had spent the last hour applauding a man they thought had built something from nothing. And he spoke the way he always spoke, quietly, without performance. "I don't usually do this," he said. "I've kept my name off these deals for 9 years because the point was never to be recognized. The point was to find people worth betting on before anyone else would." He paused. Devin had a good idea and a broken execution. I funded the idea because the numbers were real, even when the confidence around them wasn't. A few investors laughed softly, recognizing an uncomfortable truth dressed as a compliment. Then Nathan's eyes moved for the first time to the second row. Maya, she was still holding her phone, still frozen, still trying to force the last 6 months into a shape that made sense with the man now standing on that stage. He didn't glare at her. He didn't smirk. There was no triumph in his expression at all, which somehow made it worse than if there had been. "Sign carefully," he told her, the morning she served him the papers. She understood now. The applause that followed felt different from the applause that had greeted Devin minutes earlier. Quieter, more deliberate, reserved for someone who'd earned something without asking for credit. A photographer was already repositioning, angling away from the banner and toward a man who'd never wanted his picture taken. Devin stood frozen at the edge of the stage, hand half extended toward a handshake neither of them had agreed to. He'd spent 18 months believing he'd clawed his way back through sheer will, late nights, rewritten pitch decks. He hadn't known any of it had a silent architect. He hadn't known the architect had once shared a dinner table with him, or a woman, or a life that had quietly split without him noticing which half he'd landed in. Maya's mother turned to look at her daughter, and for the first time in months, said nothing at all. Nobody moved for a long moment. Renata Cole let the silence sit, the way good attorneys do when the silence is doing more work than any sentence could. Then she gestured toward the screen behind the podium, and the room's attention shifted from Nathan's face to projection above him. Page after page appeared. The original term sheet, the amended agreements, the wire confirmations dated across 18 months, each one carrying the same signature line at the bottom. Nathan Walker, not a shortened name, not an initial, the full legal signature, the one Maya had watched him write on mortgage documents and school enrollment forms for over a decade without ever once connecting it to anything larger than their own quiet life. Devin stared at the screen like it might rearrange itself into something easier to accept. Every dollar, Renata continued, every restructuring decision, every approval on this deal passed through Mr. Walker's foundation. He reviewed the business twice before funding it. He rejected it twice before that. She turned slightly toward Devin, not unkindly. You built something worth funding. He's the reason you had the chance to prove it. Devin's hand, still half raised from the handshake he never completed, dropped to his side. He looked at Nathan, then at Maya, then back at Nathan, trying to locate the version of events where this made sense, and finding none. He'd spent a year telling investors, reporters, and himself that he clawed this company back from nothing through will alone. Now the will had a name attached to it, and the name had shared a kitchen table with him once, years ago, back when none of this was anyone's plan. You knew, Devin said quietly, not really a question. I knew you had a good idea, Nathan said. That's all I ever knew when I funded it. I didn't know about you and Maya until it was already public record. That wasn't entirely true, and something in his tone told the room it wasn't. But nobody pressed. Nobody in that room wanted the truth more than they wanted the moment they were currently living in. Maya finally stood. Her chair scraped against the floor loud enough that a few heads turned. She hadn't planned to stand. Her body had simply decided the sitting was over. Nathan. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. He looked at her for the first time since walking in, not with anger. That was the part she couldn't process. Standing there in a dress bought with someone else's rising fortune, holding a phone she'd forgotten was even in her hand. She'd expected anger. She could have argued with anger. This was something else, a kind of finished calm, the look of a man who had already grieved something and moved past the grieving before she'd even noticed it happening. "You built this," she said. "All of it, and you let me believe." "I let you see what you wanted to see," Nathan said. "I never lied to you, Maya. You never asked." The room had gone silent enough that his voice reached the back rows without a microphone. A few investors exchanged glances. Renata quietly stepped back from the podium, sensing this had stopped being a business ceremony several minutes ago. "You could have told me," Maya said. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have asked why a man who could fund a $44 million acquisition drove a 6-year-old Camry to your sister's wedding?" He wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. You didn't marry a mystery, Maya. You just stopped being curious about the answer. Her mother, 3 seats down, looked at her hands. Nathan turned back to the room, the moment with Maya closing as quietly as it had opened. "I didn't come here for this," he said to the investors, to the cameras that had quietly resumed filming somewhere in the last minute. "I came because the confidentiality agreement ended today, and I keep my agreements. Devin built something real. That's worth acknowledging publicly, whatever else is true in this room." He extended his hand. This time, Devin took it, and the photograph that resulted. 2 men shaking hands under a banner that had promised one story and delivered an entirely different one. Ran on 3 business blogs by the following morning, though none of them fully explained why the handshake felt so heavy. Nathan left before the reception began. He didn't wait for applause, didn't linger for photos, didn't look back toward the second row where Maya remained standing, still holding a phone with no photo on it at all. 6 months later, Price Ventures would go on to modest, unremarkable success, the kind that comes from a decent idea and adequate funding rather than the legend Devin had once tried to build around himself. Maya would move out of the apartment she'd shared with him within a year, for reasons that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with realizing too late what she'd actually been chasing. Nathan never spoke publicly about any of it again. He didn't need to. The foundation kept funding quiet ideas from people nobody else believed in yet, the way it always had, long before anyone learned his name, and long after they'd forgotten it. Some men build empires to be seen. Nathan Walker built his to be trusted. And the woman who left him for the appearance of success never understood that she walked out on the only man who never needed to perform it.